Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings and FanDuel MLB Benny's Bats video for Friday, July 1st. We made it all the way to July. We got the All-Star game creeping up pretty soon, so we're almost at the midway point of the season. It is a nice 13-game slate for tonight, so let's get right into it. What we like to do here in the Benny's Bat section is we take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound, figure out what their weaknesses are, and then try to figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top with this KC against Philly game. Ian Kennedy on the mound for Kansas City. Both right and left-handed bats are pretty even against him batting average-wise. He does have a high fly ball rate, especially the left-handed bats. When you look at this Phillies team, though, I mean, really, there are no left-handed power bats that you want to take. If you want to be the guy that takes Ryan Howard, go ahead and be my guest. I mean, really, the only bat that I'm looking at here on this Philly team is probably Odubel Herrera, and he's not somebody that has a lot of home run upside, although he has been able to jack one out occasionally. But, you know, he's the one bat I would look at on Philly, the one guy I do like today. On the on the other side of this game, we have Jeremy Hellickson. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him in 2016. Right-handed bats had been better against him in 2014 and 2015. Really, though, if you look at his last 10 starts, he's only really had one bad game, so he's been pitching pretty well this year. This KC lineup is a little bit weaker. You know, they just lost a guy like Lorenzo Cain. They've had guys injured basically all season long. They did just get back Alex Gordon, who's a nice left-handed bat for them. I think the only two guys I'm really looking at here, you got Eric Hosmer with a 379 WOBA, 182 ISO against right-handed pitching. And then Kendrys Morales, who had a horrible start to the season, but is starting to heat up now. 355 WOBA for him, 214 ISO score. And like I said, he's been on fire lately. So these are probably the only two guys I'd really look to go after Hellickson. I feel like you should want more bats in this game. So if you wanted to go ahead and stack one of these two teams up for a tournament, I mean, I don't really like either one of these pitchers, but at the same point in time, there really aren't a lot of bats that profile to do well against them. So, you know, there's nobody that really kind of stands out to me. Next game we can look at, we got the Chicago Cubs at the New York Mets. Jacob deGrom on the mound for the New York Mets. Really tough on right-handed bats, has a very low fly ball rate, does not give up a lot of home runs. Left-handed bats do better against him, but they're still not great. You know, the one guy that kind of stands out to me in this game is Anthony Rizzo. 400 WOBA for him, 270 ISO score. He's 3 of 9 already with a home run against Jacob deGrom. You know, as I was looking down trying to figure out which bats I really wanted to take here, there aren't a lot of guys that kind of stand out to me. So, you know, I know the Cubs have a good offense, but deGrom is a good pitcher as well. So this is a game that outside of Rizzo, I don't really think I'm interested in anybody on the Cubs. On the other side of this game, we got Jason Hamill. Right and left-handed bats have been okay against them. You know, the last 3 years, he's basically been around like a 230, 240 batting average to both sides of the plate, so nothing spectacular. You know, if Granderson's back, maybe he's interesting, you know, maybe Neil Walker. But to be honest, this Mets lineup is kind of a mess right now. The one guy I still like is Cespedes, 375 WOBA, 262 ISO for him, has the home run upside, hits well in righty-on-righty situations. I mean, outside of him, though, this Mets offense, you know, it's pretty bad. So, I mean, I'm not really looking to take any of the Mets here. You know, another one of those games, it's at Citi Field, not a lot of runs usually scored there. I'd be perfectly fine not having too much exposure to it. Next game we can look at, we got Fulmer's on the mound for Detroit. And if you haven't watched this kid, he's been really, really good. He has not given up more than one earned run in any of his last 7 starts. He doesn't really go deep into the game, and he's very expensive today at $11K, so I don't think I would be able to use him on the mound. But he's also not a guy I want to take a lot of bats against. I mean, Tampa Bay has a high strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They don't really hit right-handed pitching all that well. There aren't a lot of guys who profile to do well against Fulmer. You know, the left-handed bats, guys like Corey Dickerson and Logan Morrison and Brad Miller are not anybody that's scaring me. And the right-handed bats shouldn't be all that good against Fulmer here today. So, like I said, I mean, looking at Fulmer's numbers, looking at this Tampa Bay team, I don't see anybody on Tampa Bay I want to use. But I'm going to caution you guys, $11,000 is a lot of money to pay for Fulmer, even with the strikeout upside that he should have today against Tampa Bay. I mean, he only goes like 6 innings. They barely let the kid throw 100 pitches. They're trying to kind of limit his innings that way. So I'm not using Fulmer, but I'm also not taking any bats against him. But I do think Fulmer pitches well. On the other side of this game, we got Drew Smyly, the lefty. Now, Smyly has a huge strikeout percentage, but he's also been giving up a ton of hits, a ton of runs, a bunch of walks. Right-handed bats have a higher average, more home runs against them. And this Detroit team hits left-handed pitching pretty well. Victor, I'd take Victor Martinez over Miguel Cabrera today, which is something I don't normally say or do. But I do like V-Mart a little more, 385 WOBA for him. Ian Kinsler is 5 of 13 against Smyly with a home run, 370 WOBA, 170 ISO. Nick Castellanos, 376 WOBA, 242 ISO. He's 2 of 6 lifetime against Smyly. And then even Cameron Maybin, who's been hitting in the 2-hole lately. 353 WOBA against left-handed pitching for Maybin. And like I said, he's been hitting in the 2-hole. So if he's going to be in front of all those big bats that they have up there towards the top of the order, he's definitely somebody I want to have a little bit of exposure to as well. Next game we can talk about, Los Angeles Angels at the Boston Red Sox. Stephen Wright is on the mound for Boston, and I don't ever really go against this guy. He's a little bit cheaper today. He hasn't given up more than 3 earned runs in any of his last 8 starts. Like I said, he goes deep into the games. He's a knuckleballer. He can throw 110 pitches if he has to. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but he's actually been getting more strikeouts than you would expect him to as a knuckleball pitcher. And that's the thing. It's like if you look at his underlying numbers, everyone keeps waiting for regression from this guy. And I agree. I mean, the numbers kind of point to the fact that he's been pitching a little above his head and getting a little lucky and, things are really on the side. But I mean, is that a function of the knuckleball that he's throwing, that he's getting those, more ground balls than he should? And the BABIP is low. The BABIP is low because guys just aren't squaring it up. I mean, there's an argument to be made on both sides of it. All I know is if you've been fading this guy lately, you've been missing out on some pretty good starts. And if you're taking bets against this guy, you haven't really had much success. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it here. Is I think I'm still not going to be using him all that heavy, maybe once or twice in a tournament. But at the same point in time, other than Mike Trout, 400 WOBA, he can hit any kind of pitching that I've ever seen. There's really nobody else on this Angels team that I want to take. So it's basically Trout or nothing for me here. The other side of this game, we got Jhoulys Chacin. A little bit of a reverse splits guy. Right-handed bats have a higher average the last 3 years against them. He is a ground ball pitcher. He has a low fly ball rate, low home run allowed rate, but left-handed bats do hit him pretty well. So I think guys like David Ortiz and Jackie Bradley Jr., the left-handed bats, make a little bit of sense here. I don't love Ortiz in this matchup because, like I said, Chacin's a ground ball pitcher. And if you're getting ground balls out of David Ortiz, they're turning into double plays. You really want Ortiz against a fly ball pitcher where he can hit some home runs. But again, his power and his WOBA, his ISO, I mean, he's just so good against right-handed pitching, period, that, he's still somebody you have to consider. Jackie Bradley Jr. I like a little more because he hits the ball hard, and if he hits it on the ground, he can still leg out an infield single, or, he can hit it hard enough that it gets through the infield to the outfield and he gets a single or a double out of it that way. So I do like Jackie Bradley Jr. I also think we can look at some of these righties with him being kind of a reverse splits guy the last couple of years. Mookie Betts, probably my favorite guy. I also like Pedroia. Xander Bogaerts is a cash game guy I use all the time. He's just so solid, so consistent from that 3-hole. So I like all 3 of those right-handed bats here. Next game we can talk about, we got Miami at Atlanta. Julio Teheran has quietly been dominant over the last month. His last 4 starts, listen to these numbers: 32 innings pitched, 14 hits, 2 base on balls. So he's got a whip of .50 in the last 4 starts. 5 earned runs over 32 innings pitched. So his ERA is below 2. It's like a 1.7 right now. And he struck out 30 batters in 32 innings. So he's been about as dominant as anybody in the league in the last month. Left-handed bats had been the way to go after him, especially last year when he was struggling. But he's much better this year than he was last year, even against those left-handed bats, which is a big reason why he's improved so much. But again, the left-handers are the way to attack him. So guys like Derek Dietrich, if he's leading off, Justin Bour with the power, he had a home run yesterday. Christian Yelich, another really solid batter that they have in there. So these would be the guys that I'm going after Teheran with. But honestly, I really like him today. I know Josh Kalachi's a big fan of him. My guess is Josh is going to be writing him up in his On the Bump article. And I can't really argue if anybody wants to throw him out there on the mound. I kind of like Teheran today. On the other side of this game, we got Justin Nicolino. Now, this is a tough one for me. Nicolino is a lefty, and Atlanta does not do well against left-handed pitching. So Nicolino's not really very good, but Atlanta is horrendous against lefties. So it's one of those situations where it's kind of a toss-up. He's $4,400, and I think people are going to be using him today. But I got to be honest. I mean, I'm not using any bats against him. I'm not taking any bats on Atlanta against a lefty. If you want to, I mean, you got Jeff Francoeur, you got Tyler Flowers, the two right-handed guys with a little bit of pop. But, I mean, do you really want to put Jeff Francoeur, Tyler Flowers in your rosters? Are those guys that you want to have big money riding on, in a tournament with, Frenchie and Flowers coming up? And besides, I mean, Francoeur does hit cleanup. Flowers usually 6th or 7th in the order. But even the fact that we're talking about these guys, I know Nicolino is not a good pitcher, so maybe they can still get to him. I think it's a nice contrarian play for a tournament, but I wouldn't do it in anything more than like a $3 tournament, like maybe a $3 moonshot entry because you're going to get them at 1%. But at the same point in time, the chances of them doing well are probably 1% or less anyway. So, stay away from the Atlanta bats today. Next game, we talk about Chicago White Sox against the Houston Astros. Miguel Gonzalez on the mound for the White Sox. Extreme fly ball pitcher. Left-handed bats do better against them, but right-handed bats have been solid too. So I still think this Houston team's in a good spot. The game is in Houston, so it's a positive park. Well, it's a good park for the Houston hitters, not a positive park switch for Miguel Gonzalez. I think Carlos Correa is probably my favorite bat in this game. He's the best of those right-handers up at the top of the order, hitting right-handed pitching. 372 WOBA, 226 ISO. Plus, he's been heating up again after struggling for a good part of the month of June. So I do really like Correa here. Altuve, I think, is in play. 356 WOBA, 166 ISO. He has a little bit of home run pop. He has a little bit of stolen base upside. He's going to be towards the top of the order, just pounding out hits. I like that they've moved him to the 3-hole as well because it gives him a chance to, get a few more RBI situations. He's still getting about the same number of at-bats. I mean, he may lose 1-2 at-bats a week at most. But again, with the at-bats that he has, if there's guys on, he has a chance to score more fantasy points that way. So that's some good upside. And then I also think you can take a look at the lefties. Rasmus, probably my favorite one. But even guys like Castro and Valbuena, a little bit further on down that lineup, they've been doing really well against right-handed pitching. So I think I could look at any of those guys. I do like Houston. I think they put up a big number today. The other side of this game, we got Mikey Fires pitching for Houston. He is not the same pitcher that he's been in years past. I mean, if you look in years past, he was a guy that didn't go deep into games, tried to strike everybody out. Now it seems to me like his K percentage has dropped off the table. His fly ball percentage is down. He is getting more ground balls, so he's kind of pitching to contact a little more, but it hasn't really translated into good numbers for him. The only two guys that I'd really look at on the Chicago White Sox team, I like Tim Anderson, 375 WOBA, 233 ISO for him, leading off at the top of the order, the rookie shortstop. I like Jose Abreu, 361 WOBA, 216 ISO, does have good power in righty-on-righty matchups. Outside of those two guys, maybe Adam Eaton would be the only other one, but he's basically a cash game play for me, doesn't have a lot of upside. I'm not really looking at anybody else in Chicago. I mean, I would like to take some bats against Fires, but I just don't see anybody here that profiles well against them. Next game, we talk about Texas at Minnesota. Martin Perez is on the mound for Texas. Right-handed bats have a higher average against him, but he is a ground ball pitcher, so he's a guy that doesn't get lit up a lot. And I tried to explain this to somebody the other day. It's like, I don't think he's a good pitcher. I'm not saying that, he's going to be lights out, but he is an extreme ground ball pitcher. So he does get a lot of ground balls, meaning that even if he does give up a single here or a single there or get himself in trouble with first and second, there's always the chance that he's going to throw a ground ball and get a double play and get out of whatever jam that he's in, which is why I think that, at the end of games, you can see him have like a high batting average allowed, but he doesn't normally get lit up. So people are talking today like, oh, you got to take that righty heavy Twins lineup against them. I don't really think you do. I mean, there are a lot of right-handed bats in the Twins, but none of them really stand out. The only guy that has a WOBA over 340 is Eduardo Nunez, the shortstop leading off. Now, if he was $3,200 again, sure, I think he'd be a good play, but he's getting expensive, and it's really not worth it because he doesn't have huge home run upside. He's not a huge base stealer. He's not a guy who's knocking 3 and 4 hits a game out after you. I just don't see anybody on this Minnesota team that profiles well. I know people are going to be talking about him. I think if you want to do anything in this game, I think Perez is actually a sneaky play. Like I said, people are going to tell you to stack up those Minnesota bats. I really just don't see it. Perez is not a guy who I'm expecting to get lit up today. I don't think he's going to have a good start. I don't even really want to use him on the mound, but I just can't find any Minnesota bats that make sense to use against them. The other side of this game, we got Irving Santana. Right-handed bats have a higher average against them. and a huge fly ball rate in 2016. Now, normally left-handed bats are the way you want to attack them. They have had a higher average the last couple of years. So I think a guy like Sin-Soo Choo makes a lot of sense because normally it is left-handers. If you're going to attack them with left-handers, Nomar Mazara hitting in the 3-hole. Prince Fielder is finally coming around and starting to hit the ball. So even he's a guy that I think is worth a look, especially because he's still very cheap. As far as righty on righty goes, Adrian Beltre is my favorite hitter righty on righty. Ian Desmond's been absolutely on fire. I'm not going to argue with anybody who wants to throw him in there. Jurickson Profar, depending where he's hitting in the order, another guy that's been good in righty on righty situations. So I do think that, that's the way that I want to go. Probably put some of these Texas bats in. This Texas lineup has been amazing lately. So if you want some exposure to them, you're not going to get any arguments from me. Next game we can talk about, we got Milwaukee against St. Louis. Matt Garza on the mound for Milwaukee, and I am not a Matt Garza fan. He's making his fourth start of 2016. I think he had two pretty solid starts to start the year, and people started getting excited. We know who this guy is. You know what I mean? Like he's not a stud. He didn't all of a sudden make a miraculous turnaround. In the last game out, I think he got hit around a little bit. Left and right-handed bats have a high average against them. Left and right-handed bats have a high fly ball percentage against them, which could translate into home runs. This St. Louis team does hit right-handed pitching extremely well. Matt Carpenter, 407 WOBA, 270 ISO, one of my favorite plays in the day, leading off on top of that St. Louis order. Brandon Moss had the home run yesterday, does very well against right-handed pitching, a lot of power, 265 ISO against right-handers. He's the guy with the home run upside. Matt Holliday, even righty on righty, 350 WOBA, 172 ISO, usually hits in the 3-hole for them. So he'll have a lot of RBI opportunities, especially if guys like Carpenter are getting on base and, Moss if he's in front or behind them. So I like this St. Louis team. I don't mind stacking up St. Louis Cardinals against Garza today, and I think it's a pretty good spot here. The other side of this game, you got Jaime Garcia, and he's like a reverse splits lefty, which I don't even know if there are any more of those guys in the league besides him. But left-handed bats actually hit him a little bit better than right-handed bats do. But he's another one of these guys. Huge ground ball rates, keeps the ball on the ground, doesn't give up a lot of home runs, doesn't give up a lot of fly balls. Not a lot of guys get good lift on the ball against them. I think this Milwaukee team is a trap today. People are going to say, oh, it's Milwaukee against a lefty. You got all those righties up there. Braun's got the huge WOBA, and, you can use Carter, and you can use Lucroy, and you can use, Jonathan Villar, the switch hitter batting from the right side today. But you look down the list at the BVP that these guys have against Garcia, and it's really not all that good. Like I said, Garcia is more of a reverse splits kind of guy. You want to use lefties against them. So, Scooter Gennett is probably the guy who's in the best spot here, but he's not even somebody that hits lefties well. So I don't really want anybody on this Milwaukee team. I think this Milwaukee team is a trap today. Again, if you're going to use them at all, it's a $3 bullet in a big moonshot tournament, hoping to get them low owned. My problem is I don't think they're going to be low owned because people kind of flock to Milwaukee when they play against left-handed pitching, but Jaime Garcia is not your typical left-handed pitcher. So I do think the Brewers are kind of a trap today. Even though Braun has great numbers, I'm going to be staying away from him and all the other Brewers as well. If I'm using anybody, it would probably be Braun, but like I said, I think there are just so many better spots with 12 other games today. Next game we can talk about San Francisco at Arizona. This one is interesting to me. At first glance, you would think, oh, Johnny Cueto's the man here. But you know what? He got lit up by Philly in his last start. Now, granted, he did have like 10 games before that where he gave up, 2 runs or less. So it's not like the guy sucks. I'm not saying all of a sudden Johnny Cueto's a horrible pitcher or anything. But there are some guys in Arizona that have done well against them. They profile well against them. And I just really don't see huge upside for Cueto here today. Goldie is a 397 WOBA, 236 ISO guy in righty-on-righty situations. 5 of 16 lifetime with a home run against Cueto. So those are solid numbers. You look at Jake Lamb, 362 WOBA, 208 ISO, 3 of 6 lifetime against Cueto. Those are solid numbers. Michael Bourne, who's going to be hitting in second, who we all hate. Well, he's 10 of 26 lifetime against Cueto. So if Bourne's getting on, and then he has to pitch to guys like Goldie and Lamb, who have both done well against him in his career, I could see Cueto giving up a couple runs here today. And, I definitely just don't think it's a good spot for him at all. On the other side of this game, we got Shelby Miller pitching. Left-handed bats hitting 328 against him this year with 7 home runs in 31 innings. Right-handed bats hitting 290 against him with 5 home runs in 27 innings. You lost Panic to a concussion yesterday, And that just makes this lineup just a little bit weaker. I mean, you're missing guys like Pence. You're missing Panic. You're missing Duffy. You're missing 4 or 5 guys that bat in the top 5 of that order lately. And, you're basically down to like Brandon Belt and, Buster Posey as the only 2 regulars that normally hit up in the top of the order. You also got Denard Span as well. But, I mean, he's more of a leadoff guy, just gets on base and scores some runs for you. Like I said, the lineup's kind of weak right now. So I don't like Shelby Miller. I think that normally San Francisco would light him up. But this is not the San Francisco team that we're used to. Just like with Kansas City we talk about. They still have 2 or 3 of the big bats left. But the thing that made that Kansas City lineup so good last year is, from top to bottom, there were really no easy outs. Well, San Francisco has the same problem right now. Is with all these guys injured, you went from a lineup that from top to bottom had solid hitters. I mean, you were batting guys like Brandon Crawford 8th. Now Brandon Crawford's hitting like 4th, 3rd, or 5th, or 4th in that lineup because you got 3 or 4 other guys that were ahead of him that are out. And the guys that you put in at the bottom of the order in the 6, 7, 8 slot to make up for those guys in the top of the order that you took out aren't anywhere near as good a hitters. So you're moving guys up in the order that should be lower down in the order. When Brandon Crawford is your 7th hitter, you love it. When Brandon Crawford has to be your cleanup hitter, you're probably not the strongest offense in the league. The next game we're talking about, we got Pittsburgh at Oakland. Sonny Gray on the mound for Oakland, and Sonny Gray has been a lot better. Here's my problem with him. It's taken him 100 pitches to get through 6 innings right now. He's got a low K percentage, but he's not getting rocked. So it's not like teams are putting up big numbers against him. But at the same point in time, Gray's price is like 6K, which if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, I would have jumped all over it. But right now, it's really not working out because he's only striking out 2 or 3 guys. He is still giving up a run or 2 and a couple hits. And he's only going 6 innings. So if he's not going deep, I can't really use him. If he's not striking guys out, I can't really use him. I do think you can look at some of the bats in this Pittsburgh team, though. Guys like Jung Ho Kong, somebody who hits, really well in righty-on-righty matchups. For that fact, so does like Starling Marte and Andrew McCutcheon. I mean, all 3 of these guys, when I looked them up, they all 3 of them have WOBAs like right around 360. ISO scores like a little above or a little below 200. So really solid in righty-on-righty matchups. And then the one lefty that you want to look at is obviously Gregory Polanco. Multiple hits in 4 of his last 7 starts right now. He's a guy that just has a lot of upside. There are games where he just goes 0 for 4 with like 2 or 3 strikeouts and, looks disinterested. But then there are other games where he comes out, like 4 of the last 7 games where he bangs out 2 and 3 hits in a game and then, picks up an extra walk or something. He can steal a base. He can score some runs for you. A lot of ways that Polanco can help your team. On the other side of this game, we got Jeff Locke, the lefty. Right-handed bats the way you really want to go after him. Couple big right-handed bats in this Oakland team. I love Marcus Semien anytime he faces a lefty. 386 WOBA, 222 ISO, and he's got some sneaky power for a shortstop-eligible player. Did go deep yesterday against Bumgarner, so, he's seeing the ball well right now. And like I said, he's always hit left-handed pitching well. Danny Valencia, another guy who's made a career out of hitting left-handed pitching. 396 WOBA, 216 ISO since the start of 2015 for him. Again, he's got power upside. He can get multiple hits for you. He's hitting in the middle of that order. So Valencia is another guy that I like. If you're looking for some home run upside, Chris Davis is obviously one of those guys that has that home run power. Oakland, not the greatest home run hitters park, though, so I usually like Davis a little more on the road. And he's actually a little bit better, I think, in righty-on-righty situations. So I like Davis against, like, fly ball righties and, in a good hitter's park. I don't know if I like him against, a lefty like a soft-tossing lefty like Jeff Locke and at his home park in Oakland, which is tough to hit home runs in. Next game, we talk about Baltimore at Seattle. Kevin Gausman on the mound for Baltimore, and he's been pretty good. Right-handed bats actually have a higher average and a higher fly ball rate against them. They also have more home runs. Gausman does have some strikeout upside. The Seattle team, they can strike out, but they're also a pretty solid hitting team, especially the middle part of that order. Cano's a guy I think he's got to worry about, even though, he's a little bit of a reverse splits guy. Gausman, not Cano. 378 WOBA, 216 ISO for Cano against right-handed pitching. You also have Nelson Cruz, who is a guy that I'd be a little bit worried about. Like I said, Gausman, right-handed bats hit him, for a higher average, more power, more home runs. Cruz is 366 WOBA, 226 ISO. He's the right-handed power guy that I think you got to look at. Dae-Ho Lee is another guy, right-handed power guy I think you can look at, but Cruz is so much of a better play than Lee is. And I think both guys are kind of cheap in this righty-on-righty matchup at Seattle, which isn't a good hitter's park. On the other side of this game, we got the lefty Wade LeBlanc, kind of a journeyman. Basically, he's bounced around the league for like the last 6 or 7 years. He's making his second start of 2016. He's like 30, 31 years old or something like that. So it's not like he's a rookie prospect. I mean, like I said, this guy's bounced around the league. I think he had Tommy John, and now he's kind of coming back. But so far this year, like I said, he's only made one start. But you look back at his career, right-handed bats really the way you want to go after him, especially guys with power. So Mark Trumbo stands out to me right away. 357 WOBA, 280 ISO score for him. Just huge power against left-handed pitching. I'm not sure if he's leading the league, but he's up there in like the top 3 in home runs. He's got like 22 home runs on the season. Trumbo, definitely somebody I want some exposure to. You got Adam Jones leading off, another guy that's hit left-handed pitching well his entire career. So I want some shares of Jones. Manny Machado, 364 WOBA, 204 ISO. He's actually better in righty-on-righty matchups, but as you can see by his numbers, it's not like he stinks against lefties either. So he's another guy I think could have some home run power. Something that I've been telling people, if you're trying to go into one of these big tournaments and you want to do something that makes you different, on your Baltimore stack, throw Chris Davis in there too, because this guy's power plays against anybody. He did hit a home run against a lefty the other day, and if you do think that this Baltimore stack is going to go off and they're going to chase LeBlanc from the game early, which I can see happening because it's not like he's a guy who normally goes 7 or 8 innings, you're still going to get a couple at-bats against right-handed relief pitchers. So if you have the lefty and Chris Davis in those good matchups, that's a solid spot. It's also why I like Machado a lot, because he does hit left-handed pitching well. But even when they bring in the right-handed relievers at the end of the game, Machado's a lot better in righty-on-righty situations anyway. So it kind of plays into his hands where he's going to be in a good spot for every one of his at-bats. Let's see. The next game we can talk about, we got Colorado at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Jorge De La Rosa on the mound for Colorado. Right-handed bats, higher average, more home runs against him for years and years and years. This Dodgers team, though, doesn't really have a lot of big right-handed bats. Some of the guys they were counting on really aren't having great seasons. One guy I really like is Trace Thompson, 364 WOBA, 261 ISO. Clay's little brother, really, really solid hitter, especially against left-handed pitching. Tends to find himself somewhere in the middle of the order, too, which I like. Probably right behind him in the order today is going to be Scott Van Slyke as well. He was hurt for a lot of the season. People kind of forget about him. But this is a guy who has always owned left-handed pitching. So he's very cheap. I think he's like $2,900 on DraftKings. I think he's even cheaper than that on FanDuel. I want to say he's like 24 or 26. But he has always crushed left-handed pitching. So against De La Rosa, I think Van Slyke is going to get the start. And I think he's going to be a solid option that we need to consider. On the other side of that game, we got Bud Norris, left-handed bat. Left-handed batters do better against him, but he does have a high ground ball rate in 2016, which is something you don't normally see from Bud Norris. I do want to take the lefties, though. So Cargo, 414 WOBA, 300 ISO, 4 of 11 lifetime with the home run against Norris. He's definitely a good play. Blackman leading off, 366 WOBA, 191 ISO. Again, as long as he's getting on base, as long as he's leading off, he's the road team leading off, maximum number of at-bats. I think he makes a little bit of sense. And then Nolan Arenado in righty-on-righty situations, very good, 386 WOBA, 305 ISO, which is huge. A lot of home run power, even against righties. So I do think Arenado is another guy that's in play. The last game we have is the New York Yankees against the San Diego Padres today. Nathan Eovaldi on the mound for the Yankees. Left-handed bats do better against him. He's kind of tough on right-handed bats. San Diego kind of sucks against right-handed pitching. They really have a very right-handed heavy lineup, and they don't hit lefties very well. I mean, they don't hit righties very well. You want to look at the lefties, if anything. So maybe a guy like Jankowski on the top of the order. He doesn't have a lot of upside power, but if this guy gets on base, I mean, he's basically like Cesar Hernandez was last year. If he gets on base, he's going to steal. So he's definitely somebody I think we can take a look at there, because if he can get a stolen base or two, he's going to give you a good score. Also really like Yangervis Solarte. The only other left-handed bat I'd probably look at in this lineup. I think that Eovaldi can have a decent game. San Diego doesn't do well against right-handed pitching, but San Diego also doesn't hit well against right-handed pitchers. So, it's kind of like the immovable object and the unstoppable force, only, they're both really bad. So something does have to give. The other side of this game, we got Colin Rea. Left-handed bats have a higher average, but a real low home run rate. He's kind of a ground ball pitcher. I mean, I'm a Yankees fan. I don't really like any of the Yankees here today. I guess you can look at McCann, left-handed bat, had the 2 home runs the other night at 40%, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. If you're looking to use guys for home runs here today, I think you're going to be sorely, behind the eight ball. I mean, San Diego, not a place that a ton of home runs get hit usually, although there's more than you would think. McCann, not really somebody that I think is someone who's going to repeat that 2 home run game that he had. He's not a 40 home run kind of guy. I like him a lot more in Yankee Stadium with the left-handed and short porch and all that good stuff. You want to look at Ellsbury or Gardner. I guess you can do that as well, leading off the top of the order. They're both left-handed bats too. But again, there's nothing great. There's nothing that jumps off the page to me on a 13-game slate that says I need to have these Yankees in my lineup. The one guy that kind of did that a little bit for me was Beltran, and I'm pretty sure he's still going to be out tonight. So, like I said, if you want to take some of the Yankees, be my guest. I understand the reasoning. Ray is not a very good pitcher. But at the same time, as much as it hurts me to say it, this lineup's not that great either. So thank you guys for your time. Thanks for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.